Back in the 19th century, premature burial was very common. People would be presumed dead when they'd be very much alive. This happened so often that people actually started making contraptions so that if they were buried alive, they could tell somebody and they could get dug up. Also around this time, though, grave robbers became a thing. Science was trying to take a step forward in knowing about the human body, and scientists would pay good money for dead bodies. And so people would go out at night and dig up freshly buried bodies to sell. John McIntyre lived in London, England around this time, and he had become gravely ill. He knew it wasn't looking good, and the doctors were just waiting. Then one day, John woke up and he was in a trance. He could feel things and hear things, but he couldn't move. He couldn't talk. He could kind of see. It was mostly like bright lights with some dark spots of people, and he heard the doctor say he's dead. He heard his mother cry out in pain. He tried with all his might to make some movement, to say, "I'm not dead, I'm alive. I'm alive," but he couldn't. And then his dad shut his eyes. He heard everything. He heard the funeral, his friends talking about his life he lived. He felt the pallbearers pick him up and put him in the hearse as they drove to the cemetery. He heard them place him in the tomb. He heard the dirt being piled on top, and he thought his life was over. He was being buried alive. That's some people's worst fear, is being buried alive, and it was happening to John. Sometime later, a loud noise happened, and it happened again and again and again, and John thought the animals must be after me. I'm not just going to be buried alive. I'm going to be eaten alive. But then he hears his casket open, and he feels somebody pick him up, and he's like, "Do they know I'm alive? Do they know that I'm not dead?" And then he realizes that it's grave robbers coming to take his body and sell it to science. He hears everything. He hears the conversation of them as they take him to the scientist's shop. He hears the exchange between the scientist and the grave robber. He hears the scientist get ready to do his work. And as the scientist sticks the knife in the back of John wakes up. And in a few hours, he's back to normal life. In Ephesians 2, it says, "And you were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind." Before God, we lived like the world. We craved the things of the flesh, and we did them. We were the henchmen for the devil himself. When I was a freshman in high school, I started saying things I shouldn't. Let out a cuss word here, there, saying inappropriate jokes to make my buddies laugh. I dug my grave by the destructive words, and then I laid in it. That was my death. That's what I did. But then look at verse 4. "But God, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved." Even though I was dead in this grave that couldn't be dug up, God saved me. But God sent down love, mercy, and grace in the form of Jesus Christ to dig me up and save me from sin, death, and destruction. I never deserved it, I never earned it, but I got it. Jesus dug up my grave and then sat in it when he died on the cross. Jesus paid the price for my sin, for my atonement, and he resurrected me and gave me a new life. Now, what do I do with this new life? What's my job? What's the purpose of this new life that God's given us? Well, verse 10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them." We're to do God's good works. We need to go out and tell people about him. God's prepared things in our life to do, and we have to do them. We have to show God's resurrection power to others. God's resurrected me and you, and we need to go show others that he can resurrect them too.